Hey everyone, this is Rising Feathers and it's been a while. If you've read some of my more recent community posts, been in my Discord, or follow me on Twitter, you'll know that my hiatus from content was unexpected. Life got pretty crazy over the past several months, which was bad timing because most of you were new to the channel, and this was a pretty poor first impression of what I envisioned my upload rate to be. But now that I'm in a better life situation, you should be seeing me more often. Heck, maybe we'll soon close in on that first 1,000 subs, which feels really weird to say, honestly. With that in mind, I do want to do a Q&A video when I reach 1,000 subs because I feel that, at least on YouTube, I haven't really been able to introduce myself, as it were, and just explain what I plan on using this channel for. The plan was never just Pokemon after all, that's just what I happened to put up that people really responded to. So, starting with this video and any after until I hit 1,000 subs, please leave any non-creepy questions you might have about me or the channel in the comments below. One thing I'll say about this video is that I had started it before my hiatus, and I decided to finish it rather than scrap everything I had done and start over. This also applies to the script of Final Fantasy II, which I predict will be the next video up. Thank you for your patience, and now, our feature presentation. Media consumption is not my strong suit. I'm that person who hasn't seen that movie that you probably thought everyone else has seen at some point. You can probably see where this is going, but this also extends to games. Now, of course, what you play also depends on your preferences. Battle Royales, for example, don't hold any interest for me whatsoever, so I'm not gonna go play Fortnite, but Final Fantasy is different. JRPGs and other similar genres are something I do enjoy. Octopath Traveler, Persona 5, Child of Light. These are just a few examples of games I own and love playing. So how am I missing a juggernaut like Final Fantasy? First off, I've got to be honest, I can't say I've never played one before. I've had exactly 3 Final Fantasy games I've played in the past. My brother owned Tactics Advance when we were kids, and I borrowed it a few times. However, I always got to a point where there would only be filler missions available, and I couldn't tell what the plot wanted from me, so that's where I would lose interest. Fast forward to senior year of high school, and I borrowed Final Fantasy X from a friend. I got really far. I think. I'm not sure how long it is exactly, but then I had to give it back before I could finish it. Another few years pass, and I buy a used copy of Final Fantasy VII to see if it could be really as amazing as they say. But after doing the reactor thing at the beginning, and they drop you into, I don't know, Midgar? Is that where Midgar is? I lost interest almost immediately because I couldn't for the life of me tell what was background and what was traversable. When simply going from one part of a room to the next becomes a challenge, then something has gone wrong in my eyes. So what's changed? Well, something I've grown to enjoy is taking things on as a collection or series. When I replay Spyro, I don't just play one of the games, I usually replay the whole trilogy. In between playing Final Fantasy games on stream, I've also been slowly chipping away at getting the Platinum Trophy on PS4 for all applicable Kingdom Hearts games. So with that in mind, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there'd be an appeal in tackling something as grand as a series with over 10 main series titles. I put it off for a while, but then the Pixel remasters for games 1 through 6 got announced on Steam, and for me, that was my sign that my time had come. For those who are disappointed that I won't be playing a lot of these games in their original form, I apologize, but it just overall comes down to convenience. How will these games come across to someone who didn't grow up with them? Will I have hot takes on the quote-unquote good ones? It's anybody's guess right now. And lastly, as I'll say with all of these, here's a big ol' spoiler warning, so now you can't say I didn't warn you. Let's break out Final Fantasy I. First off, let's go over the story. 4 warriors of light are chosen by the crystals of the elements: earth, fire, water, and wind. Their quest is to vanquish the forces that have made the crystals grow dark, and if they succeed, nature will be restored to balance and peace and light brought to the land. Not exactly the most original sounding story ever told, but perhaps for the time this is a lot less common. Regardless, you and your party start by arriving in Cornelia, a kingdom in distress due to the kidnapping of Sarah, their princess. The king offers to rebuild the drawbridge that would allow you to continue your journey in exchange for her rescue. Accepting these terms, you go to the ruined Chaos Shrine, where you find her as well as her captor, Garland. Once the most powerful knight in Cornelia, he now plots to take the kingdom for himself. After defeating him, you take Sarah home, and the drawbridge is rebuilt as promised. From there, you and your party traverse both the southern and northern continent, with the primary task being to defeat the 4 fiends which have darkened the crystals. In the Cavern of the Earth, you defeat the Lich, who is responsible for the Earth's rotting. Mount Gulg is where you find the Fiend of Fire, Merilith, who was awakened 200 years early due to the Lich's defeat. The Fiend of Water, the Kraken, is in the Underwater Shrine, home of the mermaids. And lastly is Tiamat, the Fiend of Wind located in the Flying Fortress, former home of the Lufenians. Performing these tasks takes you through land, sea, and air as you discover many towns that often need your help or request a task of you in some way. While they may look like side quests, most are necessary, and even those that aren't still end up benefiting you in some way. However, Tiamat's defeat does not finish the job. The power of the crystals is still converging on a central point, the Chaos Shrine. Once there, you take a time portal 2,000 years into the past, where you're confronted with the fiends once more, but stronger this time. At the end of it all is Chaos, a being that's become strong by absorbing the crystal's power, a being that we've seen before, Garland. Using the powers of the crystals, he created these stronger fiends with the goal of sending them into the future, i.e. current time, to rescue him and send him here to the past before dying at the hands of the Warriors of Light. A time loop that will keep Garland alive forever and the world in chaos, if not stopped. But after a fierce battle, he is indeed defeated and you return to your own time. The time loop is broken, causing not only the party but everyone to forget the great chaos that transpired. Darkness has been conquered, and peace prevails. So for me, this was just okay. It could be that back when this was written in the 80s that this was more original, but we've got three major tropes coming together here. That being heroes of prophecy, light versus dark, and the powers of the four elements. Though I am tickled that already in the first game, Final Fantasy was messing with big brain concepts like time paradoxes. It did make for a bit of a twist at the end, and while I am personally not a fan of the whole "and then everyone forgot it ever happened" approach, it made sense for what they were going for. What could have helped is that the party members having any sort of personality or dialogue, but they're all as blank as Pokemon protagonists. Relevant NPCs do have their own priorities and concerns, but most you don't really see again past their one-time purpose. The journey is very lateral and can feel a bit shallow. Okay, that's the story, but how does the gameplay stack up? Well, right at the start there are some decisions to make. First off, you need to name your party. They're mute, so they won't complain too much if you name them something silly. Next, more importantly, you need to pick which class you'd like each party member to be. The choices are Warrior, Thief, Monk, Black Mage, White Mage, and Red Mage. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses, so it's possible that you might want to look up the pros and cons of each class before making your choice. However, I personally just went with the default setup, which is a Warrior, Thief, Black Mage, and a White Mage, and didn't run into many problems, so that at least is not a bad combination. But a combat party needs combat, and as someone who's never played Final Fantasy, this is where I ran into a few new things, most of them having to do with how magic works. Spells are separated into levels, usually pertaining to how strong they are, and rather than having one number for total mana or magic points, each level has its own number of uses. Plus, you can only know a few spells of each level at a time, often meaning that something you'd like to have is getting left behind. Now you can overwrite an old spell with a new one, but if you want to switch back, you're going to have to repurchase it. Oh yeah, by the way, all spells are bought in the magic store scattered throughout the world. Only one time during the whole game did I find myself going back for a specific spell for a specific situation. Otherwise, I just made my decisions with the accurate mindset that I would probably not spend the time switching spells around. As to the combat itself, it's your basic turn-based battles. The dungeons in Overworld have random encounters which serve as your primary source of leveling. I do like that there's an auto battle button which speeds up the animations and auto selects the last action each character made, but a quality of life change I'd like to see is a way to just change one party member's action without having to mess with the others. For example, if my White Mage is my 4th party member and I want to change which spell they use this turn but keep everyone else the same, I still have to select the actions for party members 1 through 3 first, even though it's just selecting what they had used before I have access to the White Mage. Also, not knowing who in your party will be attacking in what order is a bummer, especially on turns where your party is interacting with each other rather than just the enemy. And my third complaint is the damage range of attacks. I found it hard to gauge my effectiveness when sometimes the damage from the same attack from one turn to the next could vary by several hundred points. We'll have to see in later games if any of these change. Something I do like is that some status afflictions such as blindness and paralysis wear off after battle. There are others such as stone and poison that do not though, so it's important to be well supplied at all times. Something I learned the hard way at the beginning of the game. I only died twice during the entire playthrough, and one was to poison getting the better of me. The Marsh Cave is a fairly early dungeon, but it's way harder than anything you've done up to then, and it's just simply due to how many enemies want to poison you. Granted, poison can't actually kill you. It stops at 1 HP. But of course at that point the smallest breeze will kill you, so ideally you want to remove that condition from yourself long before it gets to that point. The problem was by that point I had run out of resources for that and I was just trying to leave and get back to town. Unfortunately my strategy of just running away from every fight was not enough, and eventually those who were poisoned died and those who were left were not enough to survive the journey. My first party wipe. The beginning of the game does have some challenge to it. You don't have much gil yet, so you have to pick and choose what to buy, and of course your party isn't very strong yet. However, by the halfway point, or even earlier, I noticed that the game had gotten easier, not harder. I didn't grind, I simply fought whatever came my way as I traveled from point A to point B, like I usually do in these types of games. But that was enough to make almost every boss a pushover. Many died before I finished setting up my buffs on the party, my effort in trying to take the fight seriously. And soon I had enough money that amongst other things, I bought 99 antidotes so I would never have to worry about poison again. But what about that second death? Well, that was to the final boss battle, Chaos. Out of nowhere, the difficulty on him was much higher than anything else so far, so I ended up underestimating his damage and wasn't healing as I should have been. But on the second try, I stayed on top of healing more and made a couple of minor tweaks, such as using haste for the first time, I forgot I even had it, and came out with a win. I still wouldn't call him a challenging boss, but he was for sure the biggest challenge the game had to offer. It's not just about the fighting though, what about everything else? In this game, progression is barred usually by what methods of transit you have available to you. At first, it's your own 2 feet, but fairly early on you get your very own pirate ship. Yes, pirate ship. You see, after rescuing Princess Sarah, you visit the town of Prologue only to find that it's been overrun with pirates. Upon confronting them and defeating them, the captain decides to turn a new leaf and become a productive citizen. As an apology and a way to show that he's serious, he gives you his ship. Strange, but handy. This opens up many locations. You just need to be at a dock to either board or disembark your ship. Later, you're given a canoe that can access any river from any point, and lastly, towards the end, you uncover the airship that's hidden beneath the desert sands. The airship is by far the fastest way to travel and the only vehicle that isn't susceptible to random encounters. The only catch is that you can only land in a clear field environment. Things like forests and mountains won't work. But whether you're traveling in the overworld or diving into a volcano, you'll always have a map handy. Locations are marked on the overworld map as you come across them, which is great for someone like me who can never remember where anything is. Its map will lay out an entire town or the current floor you're on if you're in a dungeon. Dungeon maps are particularly useful because if you look at them while in a room, the map will show you the inside of all rooms on that floor. While you're able to see chests with these maps, they do not show any items not in chests. For example, I had missed the adamantite in the Flying Fortress at first because it was not in a chest, it was just laying out on the ground. So on the map that room was shown as empty, so I didn't bother going in. But this didn't occur very often. I've been told the maps are a quality of life change from the original game, and you can tell. Dungeons will often have layouts that feel very pointless if you can already see where you need to go. But not knowing the location of the stairs or what rooms have chests make their design more sensical. There are little to no alternate pathways, instead opting for many side rooms in a large space. Getting the chests is what takes the longest. If you just run from one set of stairs to the next, you will reach the end very quickly. However, I do recommend opening all the chests. There's a lot of gear and it's often actually usable. But more often than not, it's gil, and a lot of gil at that. You can find over 10,000 in a single chest by the end of the game. They're just throwing money at you. For the first chunk of the game, however, you'll run into several chests that can only be unlocked with the Mystic Key. Make note of where you find these because you'll be given the key as a part of the story later on. I personally didn't see a point in this, or at least in spreading them out over 5 or so different locations that I forgot about long before I got the key. On the whole, I would call this game mostly straightforward. There were times it was pretty clearly laid out where you needed to go, and others not as much. One example is the scholar who is able to translate the Rosetta Stone you find in the underwater shrine. Actually, speaking of that, let me just help you out and say that it's in that one chest you can't figure out how to get to, and you get to it by going left, off screen, where it'll loop you to the other side, like in the overworld. I mean, in the overworld, that makes sense. The world is round, so of course you come out the other side, but why does that logic work in an enclosed space? Anyway, the point is that once I had the stone, I didn't know what to do with it. I had talked to people who had referred to a scholar who could help me, but I had no idea where he was. Turns out he was in a different location than those who spoke of him, and I had happened to miss speaking with him when I was last there. Rather than speaking to every NPC in every town I had been to so far, I opted to take some help instead. Why wouldn't I? That sort of thing isn't fun. But my favorite example is the Levystone. After finding it, I vaguely remembered someone in Mount Drugar maybe mentioning it, so I go there and sure enough, there's a dwarf saying he's looking for one. Great. Except he doesn't take it from you. It's not where you're supposed to use it. All video game logic dictates that when an NPC says they're looking for something, you're to bring it to them when you find it. Doing fake-outs like that goes against the video game laws of nature. You can still have him talk about it, but maybe phrase it as either a clue of what you do need to do with it, or just some sort of vague observation about it. Not flat out saying, gee, if only someone would bring me one, and then not want it. It doesn't make any sense. I needed help on this as well. Apparently there was an NPC from long ago that had given the clue, assuming I had indeed spoken to him in the first place. For the record, I did try to talk to everyone I came across during my playthrough, but clearly I missed at least a couple. In regards to optional content, I hesitate to even say there are side quests because most of them end up being plot relevant, but there are a few that could be considered optional. However, once I finished the game, there was only one that I had to go back and do, Forge Excalibur. It has to do with the adamantite I had missed earlier. But other than that, the only one I can think of at the moment, and this moment being a day after work and it's 1 AM, is upgrading your characters. If you conquer the Citadel of Trials, you're given a rat's tail, which, when shown to the Dragon King Bahamut, will reward your courage by upgrading your party to their stronger classes. There are many benefits to this upgrade, such as more spells for your mages, a few weaker spells for those previously unable to use magic at all, and a wider range of armor and weapons for most classes. I actually did the Citadel early because I was just curious as to what was in that part of the map. It had one of those teleporter mazes, which I always hate. Nothing in a game gets me mad faster than when there's a random maze thrown in it. Enemies were whatever, but I was stuck on that floor for a lot longer than most because I was misremembering what teleporters I had already tried. Once I finished the game, I took a look at the Steam achievements. Obviously there were not achievements back in the day, but I was curious as to what was left. A nice thing about this game is that there isn't anything that's locked off or inaccessible past a certain point. Anything that is missed can be acquired later. For me, I needed to finish 5 more achievements, including the one that is simply for getting them all. The other 4 were to forge Excalibur, open the remaining treasure chests, play 15 puzzle, and to fill out the rest of my bestiary. 15 puzzle is a hidden slide puzzle that can be accessed by holding the confirm button while tapping the back button. As someone who's never enjoyed slider puzzles, I can't say I got any joy out of this, nor any reward for that matter, because in the Pixel remaster, not only was the timer removed, but any prizes for completing it as well. Fortunately, I found a formula online for completing these kinds of puzzles, which is a good thing because I did try without any help at first, and I wasn't getting anywhere fast. I already talked about Excalibur, and the rest are pretty explanatory, but I do want to talk about the last entry into my bestiary, the Warmech. The Warmech is a boss grade enemy that can be found on the bridge leading up to Tiamat in the Sky Fortress, if you're lucky. His spawn rate is 3 in 64, so depending on your luck it could take minutes or hours. I spent maybe a little under an hour looking for him, during which time I maxed out my gil and my party grew an additional 8 levels, to level 61. Finally I found him and I was ready for a challenge, but didn't get one. I ended up beating him on turn 3. I was still setting up my buffs in preparation for a big showdown. If he wasn't so hard to find, my party would not have been as strong as it was, but alas, it was his downfall. As someone who does not have any qualms about putting a game down when I've gotten my fun out of it, I can say that this game is pretty low maintenance in terms of completing it. You get nothing in game for doing these tasks, so I wouldn't do it again now that I have the achievements, but I'd say it's a pretty easy time. Fighting Chaos was by far the hardest part of the whole game, excluding the slider puzzle, but everything else presents almost no challenge other than sometimes being confused as to where to go. I'd recommend this game to those not familiar with RPGs, or those who just want a chill game without much stress or crazy strategy involved. I've been streaming Nuzlocke and my continuing quest to go after every PS4 Plat Trophy in Kingdom Hearts, so this was a nice break for me. I'm happy I played this game. It's hard to believe that the characters and stories that came in the following decades had such humble beginnings, that many series staples such as Bahamut and Masamune have been here since the very beginning. This experience has increased my excitement for this project, and I'm looking forward to moving along in the series. If you'd like to help me do that, please go give me a follow on twitch.tv/risingfeathers, link below. These games are locked behind follower goals to spread them out a bit, so the support is always appreciated. Or if you're not into that sort of thing and just like seeing the finished product, consider subscribing here. And lastly, if you want to see the playthrough this video was based on, I posted it on my second channel, Rising Feathers Plays. Link for that is in the description as well. See you in the next one!